Today, we pull back the curtain on a betrayal so deep it is rewriting the fate of American manufacturing. Stellantis, the giant behind Jeep, Dodge, and Chrysler, triggered a series of moves that will ripple through every driveway, every town, and every wallet across the country. What happens when icons fall out of step with the people who built them? How did competitors quietly outflank one of the oldest names in American industry? And what hidden decisions are being made right now that could seal the fate of your next car or your next paycheck? Stay sharp, because missing the ending of this story could mean missing the future entirely. You weren't supposed to see this coming. At the Warren Truck Assembly plant in Michigan, uncertainty brewed like a storm everyone pretended not to see. Nearly 2,400 workers, out of just 3,700, stood on the edge of elimination. The heart and soul of the plant, the Ram 1500 Classic, was being scrapped. It was not just a business decision, it was a warning shot. Warren had been kept afloat by this aging model, one foot in nostalgia, the other limping toward irrelevance. The Classic's successor had already captured the headlines and the market's imagination. Keeping the older truck alive made sense in theory, until inventory started stacking up like driftwood in a dead river. Rising costs and falling interest among buyers made the decision inevitable. In the break rooms, rumors morphed into certainty. Layoff notices started to circulate before managers even finished their shift announcements. This time, there were no illusions of a quick recall. Whole families, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, had staked their futures on Warren's assembly lines. Now they stared into a void they had never truly prepared for. Yet it was not just a product cycle ending. It was not just outdated trucks gathering dust. A deeper sickness was creeping through the auto world, one that no one could outwork or outsell. The overproduction disease was about to reveal its true cost. Overproduction's hidden price. Building too much of a good thing had once been celebrated as confidence, a sign of American manufacturing might. Now it had become a death sentence. Showroom floors groaned under the weight of unsold inventory. Parking lots stretched into the distance like abandoned graveyards of gleaming, untouched vehicles. It was a silent indictment of an industry that refused to see its own limits. Jeep Grand Cherokee sales, once a dependable cash cow, slid relentlessly downhill through 2024. Dodge's aging Durango and Charger limped through the same fate. Chrysler, the once proud titan, barely kept its head above water with just two surviving models: the Pacifica minivan and the Chrysler 300 sedan, the latter more relic than revelation. Across dealerships, the stories repeated themselves. Customers hesitant, wallets tighter, enthusiasm dulled by economic fatigue. Inflation gnawed at every corner of American life, but it was the rising interest rates that truly slaughtered the buying spirit. Dreams of driving home a brand new SUV evaporated under the reality of crushing monthly payments. The irony was cruel. Even as demand cooled, the factories kept humming, oblivious. Production schedules set during the boom years of stimulus spending and pandemic-era savings had not slowed to meet reality. Stellantis yards filled, not with buyers, but with regrets on four wheels. We dug deep, connecting the collapse of Jeep, Dodge, and Chrysler to every shuttered diner, every abandoned lot, every lost dream across America. Now you see it's not just layoffs, it's a slow-motion wreck unfolding in real time. If this pulled back the curtain for you, hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your take. Yet this was only one layer of a far larger reckoning. Beyond showroom struggles, far from union meetings and shuttered gates, another storm brewed, a macroeconomic blizzard that no single factory could survive. Punch to the gut economics. When Stellantis executives spoke of aligning production with demand, they wrapped devastation in the soft velvet of corporate jargon. Workers living paycheck to paycheck knew better. Alignment meant elimination. It meant your child's school fees slipping out of reach. It meant your mortgage payment teetering on the edge of default. It meant hope, real and tangible, draining away with each day you sat at home refreshing a dead-end job board. Families in Ohio and Michigan had heard the promises: resilience, rebirth, reinvestment. They had endured automation, foreign competition, and economic recessions. Yet nothing prepared them for this. This was not a slow erosion. It was an ambush. The collapse was not random. It was engineered. It was the inevitable result of decisions made by distant executives who saw vehicles, not livelihoods; quarterly projections, not human consequences. Trucks and SUVs stacked like dominoes could not move themselves off lots. Interest rates that had quietly ticked upward through 2023 now slammed shut the wallets of middle America. Consumers faced a devil's bargain: stretch your finances to the breaking point or settle for less, and millions settled for less. The vehicles Stellantis poured billions into building sat under increasingly hostile skies, their chrome skins no match for the economic cold snap. And the coldest part was yet to come, because even beyond the plants, beyond the union halls and the supply yards, a much harsher reality was already rushing towards Stellantis and the entire American auto industry with terrifying speed. Foreign fleets on the offensive. While Detroit clung to familiar rhythms, Seoul and Tokyo rewrote the playbook. Korean and Japanese automakers were not merely catching up, they were running circles around their American competitors. Hyundai flooded showrooms with sleek hybrids that offered better mileage and cutting-edge designs at prices the average American buyer could still stomach. Toyota, the silent giant, expanded its domination with a relentless rollout of both hybrid and electric vehicle options, cornering the practical buyer segment. Even Volkswagen, a brand once battered by scandal, found renewed momentum. Their electric vehicle lineup gained ground with efficient models and aggressive pricing, steadily siphoning away customers Stellantis had long taken for granted. Inside Jeep and Dodge dealerships, the erosion was unmistakable. Brand loyalty, once ironclad, wavered as buyers compared sticker prices and fuel economy figures. Some walked away with foreign badges on their new rides. Others simply stayed home, unwilling to trade a second mortgage for a new truck. The handwriting was on the wall. Foreign brands were not just offering alternatives, they were offering the future. Stellantis, weighted by legacy costs and aging lineups, suddenly looked more vulnerable than ever. Yet even this competitive humiliation would pale in comparison to the next global wave crashing toward American shores. China's price war arrives. One Chinese electric vehicle rolling onto a Western dock might have seemed a novelty a few years ago. In 2024, it became something closer to an invasion. Manufacturers like BYD and NIO expanded faster than anyone had forecast, deploying low-cost, high-efficiency electric vehicles packed with the latest battery technology. These were not knockoffs, they were market shapers, offering smart features, longer ranges, and modern styling at prices American manufacturers could not hope to match without bleeding margin. European regulators scrambled to investigate the flood of subsidized imports. United States policymakers, already grappling with tariff upheaval, watched warily as Chinese automakers eyed global expansion. For Stellantis, the arrival of these juggernauts was an existential threat. Jeep's hopes of electrifying its future, Dodge's tentative steps into performance electric vehicles, Chrysler's revival dreams. All of it risked being undercut before reaching critical mass. Showrooms that were supposed to showcase Stellantis' reinvention now threatened to become ghost towns. Inventory piled up again. Discount offers crept back into advertising. Consumer chatter shifted from excitement to skepticism. The company's leadership knew they could not compete on price alone. Yet before they could even strategize a counterattack, another blow slammed into their fragile supply chains. This time, not from abroad, but from the Oval Office. Tariff Tsunami. It took only one signature. In late 2024, President Donald Trump signed a sweeping tariff order imposing a 25% levy on all imported vehicles and automotive components. The political justification was simple: bring manufacturing back home. The economic effect, however, was immediate chaos. Stellantis, with its intricate web of factories and suppliers stretched across Canada, Mexico, and beyond, felt the shock first and worst. Parts shipments stalled. Cross-border assembly slowed to a crawl. Plants in Windsor, Ontario, and Toluca, Mexico ground to a halt, leaving more than 7,000 workers without jobs. The costs piled up faster than anyone could adjust. Materials sourced at yesterday's prices now carried a premium that shattered budgets. Vehicles in mid-assembly sat incomplete, awaiting transmissions, electronics, and engines stuck on the wrong side of border bottlenecks. In the boardrooms of Auburn Hills, Michigan, reality set in with chilling clarity. Stellantis faced an estimated $41.9 billion in additional production costs across its American operations alone. Ford and General Motors would not escape the same fate, but Stellantis, already weakened, teetered closest to the edge. Dealerships posted frantic price hikes. Base models that once sat under $30,000 now soared past $35,000, even before dealership markups. Buyers balked, hesitant even to browse, let alone buy. And as American manufacturing ideals clashed with globalized economic structures, another crisis quietly brewed back home, a crisis that no tariff could contain. Union alarm bells. In union halls across Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois, the air turned thick with dread. The United Auto Workers had weathered tough negotiations before. They had fought automation threats, resisted offshoring, and clawed back concessions through strikes. But this time felt different. When even the strongest unions began to falter, it was clear how deep the industry's fractures ran. Leadership issued stern public condemnations, demanding immediate dialogue with Stellantis executives and threatening walkouts if protections were not reinforced. Yet behind closed doors, a grim reality settled in. Bargaining power had eroded. The layoffs had not just stripped factories of workers, they had stripped entire communities of stability. Restaurants near Toledo's South Assembly reported double-digit sales drops. Childcare centers laid off staff as enrollment numbers plunged. Local supply vendors, once tied to steady automotive contracts, quietly shelved expansion plans and braced for more cancellation. The layoffs rippled outward like a slow, poisonous tide, dulling economic activity in places already struggling to recover from earlier downturns. School districts anticipated budget shortfalls as tax revenues shrank. Credit unions posted warning bulletins about rising loan defaults. Food banks recorded their highest demand levels in years. Yet, amidst the slow-motion collapse, Stellantis showed no signs of rethinking its strategy. If anything, leadership prepared for deeper cuts, more realignments, and harsher negotiations with their increasingly desperate workforce. And just beyond the horizon, another shift loomed, one that would shake not just union halls and dealership lots, but the very foundation of Stellantis itself. Rehiring under fire. First they cut you loose without warning, then they called you back, just as quickly, just as coldly. No apology, no promises, just a summons. Report back to work or risk being left behind permanently. In early 2025, just weeks after terminating over 1,100 jobs at Toledo South Assembly, Stellantis abruptly reversed course. Word spread fast across Ohio. The layoffs were being rescinded. Workers who had packed up their lockers, filed for unemployment, and explained the heartbreak to their families were now being ordered to return to the very same jobs that had been deemed excess a month earlier. Relief surged through some homes. Mortgage payments could be made again. Health benefits were reinstated. Yet underneath that flicker of hope burned deep resentment. For many, the damage had already been done. Trust in the company's leadership was shattered. Faith that seniority or loyalty mattered had evaporated. No clear answers came from Stellantis headquarters. Was the recall driven by political pressure from state lawmakers, a recalibration after overestimating inventory backlogs, or a calculated public relations move designed to blunt union threats before negotiations reignited? Inside Toledo's break rooms, no one believed it was a gesture of goodwill. They were back on the clock, but now every shift carried the silent knowledge that they could be discarded again just as easily. The temporary bandage could not hide the gaping wound opening wider across the American auto landscape, because far beyond layoffs and recalls, the existential question for Stellantis loomed larger than ever. Could it survive the technological war it had promised to win? Electrification versus survival. Going green was supposed to save the industry. It was supposed to usher in a new golden age of mobility. It was supposed to make Stellantis a leader for the 21st century. Yet by 2025, it was clear that going electric was not just difficult, it was dangerous. The dreams painted in glossy investor presentations collided head-on with the gritty realities of supply shortages, soaring material costs, and a consumer base growing less enthusiastic by the quarter. Battery factories delayed their openings. Critical minerals became harder and more expensive to procure. Interest rates, still high from the Federal Reserve's inflation battles, made financing a brand new electric vehicle a burden too heavy for middle-class families. Suddenly, the electric future looked more like an electric gamble. Stellantis scrambled to adjust its strategy. Instead of committing fully to electric vehicles, it hastily dusted off plans to prolong internal combustion engine production and expand hybrid offerings. Jeep Wrangler plug-in hybrids were rushed to more dealerships. Dodge teased hybrid performance models to bridge the gap between muscle car nostalgia and environmental mandates. It was a pivot born not from bold vision, but from necessity. And it was a pivot made with the growing awareness that rivals like Ford and General Motors had already moved far more aggressively. Ford's electric truck fleet was rolling. General Motors' Cadillac and Chevrolet divisions had EVs hitting the streets in growing numbers. Tesla, meanwhile, remained an omnipresent specter, drawing buyers who once would have sworn loyalty to Jeep, Dodge, or Chrysler. As Stellantis hesitated, competitors surged ahead. Then, just when the company needed stability and decisiveness most, its leadership cracked. Leadership roulette. Carlos Tavares had been a symbol of Stellantis' early promise, a master of mergers, a steady hand guiding the chaos of multinational auto conglomerates. His sudden resignation in December of 2024 stunned not only investors, but employees at every level. There was no farewell tour, no long goodbye letter, only a sterile corporate announcement. Effective immediately, Tavares was stepping down. Behind the scenes, the fractures were no mystery. Dissatisfaction with sluggish electric vehicle rollouts, frustration over strained labor negotiations, mounting tension with European and American board members alike, and an undeniable sense that Stellantis was reacting to crises rather than steering through them. Without Tavares, the vacuum of uncertainty grew. Interim executives issued reassurances, but the markets responded with sharp skepticism. The unions hardened their stances, sensing opportunity. Suppliers began quietly drafting contingency plans in case orders slowed further. It was leadership roulette at the worst possible time. With no strong captain at the helm, Stellantis' ship drifted into waters filled with competitors ready to pounce, and storms the company had barely begun to weather. Yet internal dysfunction was only part of the battle. A deeper, almost irreconcilable split had opened inside Stellantis itself, pitting continent against continent, strategy against survival, regional tug-of-war. In Europe, the future was clear and legally mandated. Battery-powered vehicles were not optional. They were the cost of doing business. Stellantis European arms embraced the transition aggressively, investing billions in electrification and securing deals for battery production under strict environmental standards. In North America, however, reality looked starkly different. The American heartland remained deeply tied to fuel-powered vehicles, trucks, SUVs, big engines, and affordable reliability. Charging infrastructure remained patchy outside urban cores. Consumer confidence in electric vehicles remained tentative, even suspicious. Gas prices fluctuated, but stayed far below European levels. Incentives were inconsistent and politicized from state to state. What worked in Paris or Berlin was doomed to fail in Peoria or Des Moines. Yet Stellantis leadership, stretched between conflicting demands, could not present a coherent face. European divisions pressed harder for full EV conversion. North American managers fought to protect profitable combustion models. The corporate strategy meetings devolved into trench warfare over what the company should even be building 5 years from now. Caught between the emission laws of Brussels and the pickup truck culture of Texas, Stellantis flailed. Every delayed decision opened more ground for Ford, General Motors, Hyundai, Tesla, and the rising Chinese brands to steal. Inside the factories, inside the dealerships, inside the boardrooms, one feeling grew unmistakable. Indecision was becoming the deadliest competitor of all, because while Stellantis struggled to choose a road, others were already racing ahead at full speed. Brand identity on the line. What happens when no one knows who you are anymore? That was the silent crisis creeping through the halls of Stellantis, through the production lines, and into the showrooms. Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and Ram had once stood as titans, each evoking immediate images: rugged adventure, muscle car bravado, American luxury, heartland dependability. Now, confusion. Jeep's attempt to pivot toward electrified SUVs blurred its identity. Wrangler loyalists bristled at the thought of plugging into a wall instead of conquering trails. Dodge teetered between honoring its muscle car roots and introducing hybrid versions that felt to diehards like watered-down echoes. Chrysler, with only a minivan and an aging sedan left in its arsenal, struggled for relevance against a tide of flashier rivals. Ram, still strong but pressured, faced an onslaught of competition from Ford's expanding electric fleet. Each brand felt like it was walking a tightrope, without a net, without a clear destination. Consumers, once fiercely loyal, now hesitated. Was Jeep still the off-road rebel? Was Dodge still a roar on the asphalt? Was Chrysler still worth remembering? Brand identity could not be engineered overnight. It was built on trust, on consistency, on understanding your tribe. Stellantis risked not just losing customers, it risked losing the very soul that had once made these names iconic. And as brand confusion deepened, another battlefront was already heating up in Washington, D.C., where the stakes were measured not in loyalty or horsepower, but in political survival. Stakeholders mobilize. When factories fall silent, politicians start yelling. In early 2025, lawmakers from Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois, both Democrat and Republican, began sounding alarm bells in Congress. They warned of an economic bloodbath if production instability continued unchecked. Behind closed doors, plans emerged to craft new tax incentives aimed at stabilizing the auto sector. Proposals floated to strengthen domestic supply chains, subsidize retooling costs, and penalize companies who shifted operations overseas. Meetings between governors, union leaders, and Stellantis lobbyists grew more frequent and more tense. Yet time was not on anyone's side. Washington moved at its typical glacial pace. Incentives promised today could take months, even years, to materialize. In the meantime, Stellantis had to make decisions now: where to build, what to build, and who to trust to buy it. Investors grew restless. Credit agencies issued warnings. Rivals circled like sharks. Publicly, Stellantis executives spoke of commitment to the United States workforce. Privately, the math told a harsher story. If the costs of staying exceeded the costs of leaving, loyalty would mean little. Cold, hard balance sheets, not patriotic slogans, would decide the future. And meanwhile, far from Capitol Hill and quarterly earnings calls, the real damage continued to spread, not in headlines, but in heartbeats. Community collateral damage. You feel it first at the corner diner, then you feel it at the town bank. When a factory shutters, the layoffs are just the beginning. Stellantis pullbacks at Toledo, Warren, Windsor, and Toluca were already sending invisible aftershocks through every local economy tied to them. In Toledo, restaurant owners who once opened early to feed workers coming off the night shift now faced empty booths and shrinking menus. In Warren, hardware stores saw sales nosedive as mechanics, and plant workers cut back on household repairs. Credit unions, once flush with auto loan applications, began tightening lending standards, anticipating rising delinquencies. Schools faced declining enrollment. Police and fire departments braced for budget cuts. City councils scrambled to rewrite fiscal plans with fewer tax dollars flowing in. There was a grim familiarity to it. Many of these communities had already endured past waves of deindustrialization. They knew the pattern: first layoffs, then foreclosures, then an endless struggle to lure back the life that once buzzed through every corner of town. Layoffs did not just eliminate jobs, they hollowed out identity. They turned vibrant places into shells. And yet, Stellantis' reshuffling was not done. As painful as these immediate losses were, the company's ultimate decisions about where and how to invest over the next 3 years would determine whether entire regions found renewal or slipped into irreversible decline. At the heart of it all was a deeper question. Would Stellantis adapt in time to save itself, or would it become just another cautionary tale of a titan too slow to change? Crossroads of the auto age. Adapt or be forgotten. That was no longer a theoretical debate. It was the ultimatum facing Stellantis at the dawn of 2025. Hybrid bridges, electric moonshots, internal combustion life support. Every option came with peril, with potential reward, with irreversible consequences. The company's announcement of plans to revive the Belvidere assembly plant in Illinois offered a glimmer of hope. A new mid-size pickup truck, 1,500 jobs restored. The symbolism mattered. Communities needed wins, however small. But the deeper truth was harder to face. This alone would not be enough. Stellantis needed a coherent vision, not just short-term patches. It needed leadership that could navigate the contradictions of American and European markets without losing ground in either. It needed to rebuild trust with workers, investors, and customers simultaneously. Above all, it needed to recapture what had once made its brands legendary, not through nostalgia, but through reinvention grounded in reality. Because the collapse of an icon does not just end on the factory floor. It ends on Main Street. It ends in the homes where workers once pinned dreams to the simple promise of a good job, building good vehicles. The crossroads had arrived. Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and Ram were still standing, for now. But history does not wait for hesitant companies. The road ahead for Stellantis is anything but guaranteed. Will they embrace real reinvention, or simply patch the cracks until the foundation gives way? Can a single revived factory reignite the spirit of brands that once defined American roads? Or is it already too late to reclaim what's been lost? These are not just corporate questions. They are questions about the future of workers, families, and communities. So what do you think? Can Stellantis truly turn the tide? Or is this just a temporary reprieve before a larger collapse? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you.